I took care of my neighbor's disabled father for free while they vacationed. One day, I came home to find him gone, and my living room full of their furniture. You seemed lonely, she smiled. Now we live here too. I contacted a lawyer immediately, but then. I live alone in a one-story home just outside Spokane, Washington. It's a quiet area, mostly older people or small families. I keep to myself. I don't host parties, I don't get visitors. I work from home doing accounting. My life is boring, but it's stable. About a year ago, a woman named Denise moved in next door. She had a teenage son, Kyle, and her father, Richard, who was in a wheelchair. She told me he'd had a stroke. Her place looked cramped, always busy with people coming and going. We spoke once in a while across the fence. She seemed tired but polite. It started when she knocked one afternoon and asked if I could sit with her dad for just an hour. She had to run to the pharmacy. I said sure. Richard didn't talk much, just nodded and watched TV. After that, it became regular. She'd ask for a few hours, then a day. Then a whole weekend. I didn't ask for money. She'd sometimes bring over banana bread, or offer to pay for gas if I took him to appointments. I didn't mind helping. I'm used to being alone, and it felt good to be useful. 3 weeks ago, she came by looking worn out. She said they were going to Disneyland. A big trip for her son before he graduated. She looked emotional, almost guilty, handing me a pill organizer and a list of his needs. I told her not to worry. I'd done it before. The first week went like normal. I made simple meals, wheeled Richard around the park, helped him shower. He didn't talk much but smiled sometimes. I felt like I was helping. Then one Thursday, I left for a grocery run. Gone maybe an hour and a half. When I came back, my key didn't work. I stood on my porch trying to twist the lock. It had been changed. I knocked. Denise opened the door like she'd been waiting for me. She was barefoot, holding a mug, smiling. "Oh. You're back," she said like I was the guest. I stepped inside slowly and stopped cold. My couch was gone. My photos were down. In their place was her giant sectional, her plants, her teenage son's sneakers by the door. Their stuff. Everywhere. I didn't understand. "Where's Richard?" I asked. She walked past me into the kitchen like it was hers. Oh, the facility had an opening. We moved him in yesterday. It was time. He needs full-time care. She poured herself water. I didn't move. "Why is your stuff here?" She smiled like she was explaining something to a child. "I told you, you seemed lonely. And we needed more space. It just makes sense, right? We all get along. You already helped so much." I just stared. "You didn't answer my texts," she added, shrugging. "So I assumed it was okay." I left without saying a word. Got in my car and drove to my friend Leah's house across town. I used her internet to look up a lawyer. But it turns out, Denise had already thought of that. When I got to Leah's, I was shaking. She opened the door and took one look at me and said, "What happened?" I told her everything. The furniture, the locks, Denise acting like she lived there. Leah thought I was joking at first. She let me use her laptop, and I started looking up local attorneys. Found one with good reviews, called, and they gave me a next-day appointment. The lawyer, a man named Gerald Polk, listened carefully while I explained. He nodded slowly, then asked, "Do you have proof this is your house?" I showed him my mortgage documents. The deed. Utility bills. Everything. He raised an eyebrow. "And they just moved in?" "While I was taking care of her dad," I said. "For free." Gerald made a face I'll never forget. Not shocked. More like tired. "This kind of thing happens more than you'd think," he said. "Not always this bold. But squatters know how to play the system." Squatters. That word hit me in the gut. He filed something called an unlawful detainer that same day. Told me it could take a couple of weeks. Maybe more, depending on how Denise responds. She'll get served within a few days, he said. After that, the court gives her a chance to respond. Don't talk to her. Don't threaten her. Just wait. I agreed. 2 days later, I drove by the house just to see it. My curtains were gone. Someone had put a lawn flamingo in my front yard. There was a bicycle leaned against the garage. Then, I noticed something strange. A for rent sign was staked in my front lawn. I slammed on the brakes, parked, and walked up to the sign. A number was written on it in Sharpie. I called. A woman answered, chipper. Hi. This is Darlene from Birchwood Rentals. I asked about the listing at my address. Oh yes, it's a 3-bedroom. Available immediately. Just listed this week. Pets allowed. I almost dropped my phone. She's trying to rent out my house, I told Gerald that night. He sighed. Now it's fraud. We can push for an emergency hearing. 3 more days passed. Then one night, Leah called me at 1 a.m. You need to see this, she said. She had found a Facebook post on a local community group. It was a video, recorded from the sidewalk, of Denise standing on my porch with 2 young couples, giving a tour of the house. I live here now, she says in the video. It's kind of a shared situation, but I'm the point of contact. In the background, you can hear Kyle laughing, saying, yeah, my mom's a genius. That video changed everything. Gerald said it was strong evidence, clear proof she was presenting herself as the legal occupant, and trying to profit off it. He filed for an emergency hearing. The court date was set for the following Monday. But on Saturday, I got served. Denise had filed a restraining order against me. The papers said I had been harassing and stalking a single mother, and that I'd threatened violence. She claimed I was obsessed with her, that I'd been forcing my way into her home and scaring her son. I couldn't believe it. I called Gerald in a panic. He was calm. It's retaliation, he said. We'll deal with it in court. But it's going to make things messy. I showed up for the emergency hearing on Monday with everything, my deed, bills, photos, text messages. Leah came as a witness. Gerald laid it all out, the free caregiving, the vacation, the lock change, the Facebook video, the fake rental listing, the restraining order. Denise showed up late. She wore a blouse like she was going to church. Her son sat behind her, smirking. She told the judge I had abandoned the house, that I gave permission, that we were working on a new living arrangement and I got cold feet. Her tone was calm, rehearsed. She even cried at one point, saying she was scared for her son's safety. But the judge wasn't buying it. He gave her 72 hours to leave the property. Said law enforcement would supervise if needed. Called her behavior deceptive and malicious. I felt a kind of relief I hadn't felt in weeks. But it didn't last. When I got home that evening, the entire house was trashed. Not just messy, wrecked. Food smeared on the walls. Holes punched in the drywall. My mattress sliced open. My dishes broken in the sink. Even the toilet was shattered. They didn't leave quietly. The police came, took photos, filed a report. I sent everything to Gerald. Insurance covered some of the damage, but not all. The emotional hit was worse. That night, I slept on a borrowed air mattress in my wrecked bedroom. Around 3 a.m. I heard a knock at the back door. When I looked through the blinds, I saw Kyle standing in the yard. Just staring. I didn't open the door. I just stood there, watching, as he slowly turned and walked back toward their car. And then, a week later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Richard. It was written in shaky handwriting, almost illegible. But I read it 10 times. The letter was short, only 1 page, torn from a spiral notebook. The handwriting was uneven, letters sliding down the page like he'd written it on his lap. It started with my name, spelled correctly, which already felt like a surprise. I'm sorry they did this to you. I sat at my kitchen table, still surrounded by damaged walls and cracked tile, and read it again. I didn't know what they were planning. Denise told me we were staying with family. Then she said I couldn't come back. He went on. I didn't want to leave your house. I liked it there. You were kind. You talked to me like I mattered. I don't remember much sometimes, but I remember that. You made me eggs, and you cut my nails. Denise never cuts my nails. I had to stop reading for a second. My throat felt tight. They say I'm confused, but I know what happened. I heard her tell Kyle, if we play it right, we'll never have to pay rent again. I didn't say anything. I should have. I didn't think you'd believe me. I don't want to live with them anymore. It ended with, if you can get me out of here, I want to come back. There was no return address, but the envelope was postmarked from a town about 40 minutes north. I googled the name of the nursing facility printed faintly on the corner of the envelope. It was a real place. I brought the letter to Gerald the next day. He read it carefully, then leaned back in his chair. If we can prove she removed him from your care under false pretenses, he said, and dumped him in a facility while committing fraud using your property, we might be able to press criminal charges. At the very least, we can build a stronger civil case. But he's her father, I said. Wouldn't that make it legal? Gerald shook his head. Not if she neglected his care. Not if he was being used as a cover. If what he's written here is true, it strengthens your entire position. I sat there thinking about how many mornings I'd helped Richard out of bed. How he used to nod when I asked if he wanted toast or oatmeal. How he'd fall asleep during the Price is Right and drool on the blanket. That night, I called the facility. I asked to speak to Richard. They told me he wasn't allowed phone calls without family permission. I asked if I could be added to his visitor list. The nurse hesitated. You're not listed at all. I hung up. The next day, I drove out there anyway. I walked in and asked for him by name. The woman at the desk looked uncomfortable. You're not family, she said. We're not allowed to let anyone visit unless they're cleared by his daughter. I held up the envelope. He wrote me this. She read it. Her face changed. Wait here, she said quietly. 10 minutes later, Richard was wheeled into the visitor room. He looked up at me and smiled. You came. He looked smaller than I remembered. His clothes didn't fit right. His hands were shaking. I'm getting you out of here, I said. He nodded. Don't tell Denise. Richard and I only had about 20 minutes before a nurse stepped back in and said, that's all for today. But in that short time, he told me more than I expected. He said Denise had taken his disability checks for years. That he wasn't even aware he had benefits until a social worker at the facility mentioned it. She keeps the card, he said. I just sign things. He told me he hadn't been to a doctor in over a year until he was admitted to the nursing home. That sometimes, when he asked for things, basic stuff, like socks or shampoo, she'd tell him they couldn't afford it. She tells people I don't know what's going on, he whispered. But I do. I brought all of this back to Gerald. He shook his head slowly, then made a few calls. We contacted Adult Protective Services. He also advised me to file a police report. Not just about the damages to my house, but about the possible financial abuse of a vulnerable adult. Everything moved quickly after that. APS sent someone to the facility to interview Richard. He confirmed what he'd told me in the letter, and more. That Denise had threatened to put him in a state home if he ever told anyone about the checks. That sometimes, she didn't give him his medication when she was angry. A week later, I was allowed to visit Richard again. He looked calmer. The nurses were treating him better, and the staff told me he'd been more social. But Denise must have caught wind of what was happening, because the next day, she was at my door. She didn't knock. She stood in the yard, arms crossed, like she was waiting for me to come out. I didn't. She yelled from the porch. You think you're going to turn everyone against me? I didn't say a word. She screamed, that old man is a liar. I closed the blinds. A few hours later, someone egged my front window. Leah's Ring camera caught Kyle doing it. I filed another report. Days later, I got a call from Gerald. You might want to sit down, he said. Denise had filed a countersuit. She was claiming emotional distress. Said I'd manipulated her father, and that I was using made-up accusations to steal her family's money and ruin their lives. She's doubling down, Gerald said. This is going to court. And then he paused. There's one more thing, he added. She's trying to get emergency guardianship over Richard. If she wins that, she could pull him out of the facility before any investigation is done. I felt sick. But Gerald wasn't done. She listed your name in the filing, and says you're trying to exploit him for his benefits. That was the moment I realized, this wasn't just about my house anymore. This was about control. About who gets to tell the story. And she wasn't going to let go quietly. I still visit Richard every week. He always asks the same question before I leave, am I coming home soon? And I always tell him, I'm working on it. But the truth is, I don't even know where home is anymore. Not after what she did. Not after what I let happen right in front of me.